There were definitely some broken dreams yesterday as the Saints and the Chiefs are out of the contest for Super Bowl 53. Patriots return. Rams return for the first time in 17 years. Along with Scott Grayson, I'm Josh Hennig, live here in the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Every day after NFL Sunday, we are joined throughout the year by the football scientist himself, KC Joyner. Follow him on Twitter at KC Joyner TFS, ESPN.com. NFL Insider joining us on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Casey, how are you doing on the day after?
Feeling great. I love that Edge intro. That is an awesome way to go, and a perfect way to, you said, broken dreams. There are a couple of broken dreams today with the Saints and the Chiefs. So close and yet so far.
You know, it's one of the things that stood out to me, Casey, and I want to get your perspective on this off the bat, is you go through the numbers after the game. The Patriots, they outplayed, statistically, the Chiefs offensively. The Rams' offense outplayed the Saints statistically offensively. More total yards, more rushing yards, more first downs. In the time of possession, the Patriots-Chiefs game, the Patriots well outplayed them 43-20. So, you know, how can two teams be so statistically outplaying the other team, but yet the score be so close?
Well, the Saints would tell you that part of it was the officiating, but officiating was such a bad thing on both sides of the ball for a lot of ways yesterday. And I think the matter of, like, the Patriots, they played the type of game plan they wanted to play. But you remember back to Super Bowl 25 when they had that famous, the Giants played a certain type of game plan and they won. Yeah, they barely won because the game plan was able to accentuate their strengths, but it wasn't able to completely eliminate the weaknesses. Look, the Chiefs still were able to get their offense going and were able to get stuff, turn that into a shootout contest. So they were able to do what they needed to do to keep up, but it's just a matter of that these teams do the game plans in a way that they maximize the production that they got.
Belichick is famous for eliminating a guy or two from you. And in yesterday's game, he made Tyreek Hill absolutely just totally ineffective, and it seemed to limit the Chiefs in the first half. Now, they were able to still play better in the second half. You could argue the Patriots won the first half, the Chiefs won the second half, then in overtime it came down to basically a coin flip.
It did, and part of it is that it was mentioned coming into the game last week that the Patriots, they had certain things that they wanted to do. They wanted to protect their run defense because the run defense had been so bad for a good portion of the year, and they had a loaded box yesterday where they have an extra defender in the box on a ton of plays, and they didn't leave Kansas City many opportunities to not have a loaded box. So basically what I'm saying is that they said, we're going to stop your running game, and then we're going to make you throw the football. And when you throw the football, we're either going to double Hill or we're going to double Kelsey. We're going to take these guys out of the contest in a way that makes you not able to maximize them, and you're going to have to beat us with your alternates. And they were able to do that enough to eke out a win.
Casey, it's Scott Grayson here. When you look at what happened yesterday, and Josh sort of alluded to this about a coin flip, the NFL's really done a better job of making overtime give the team that loses the coin flip a chance to still win the game. But yesterday we saw Pat Mahomes not even get a chance on the field. To me, it feels like something needs to change here a little bit more, even if it's just playoff rules for overtime. But what's your sense on what you saw yesterday? And I mean, it was exciting football, great drama in both games, but it feels like something might need to be tweaked here.
I'd take a page from the college football ranks where they say, and I don't want to necessarily take on the college football rules, but in college football, even though they play on that little 25-yard field in overtime, it still feels like that both teams had an opportunity. And what did Mina Kimes, one of my ESPN associates, coworkers, she said on Twitter, she said that she doesn't necessarily think that the rule is unfair, but she said it would have been great to see, from an entertainment perspective, it would have been great to see Patrick Mahomes go out there and see if he could match. And I'm kind of that same mindset to say, the Chiefs defense couldn't stop the Patriots. Okay, in today's day and age, in this offensive heavy era that we're in, I don't know if I want to just leave it down to if the defense could have stopped the offense. I want to see, okay, can the other team's offense keep up and let it go on for at least one quarter and see if you're still tied then. So I would be for altering the playoff rules. Probably not in the regular season, but the playoff rules I absolutely would give both teams at least one shot.
Totally with you. Love it. As far as what else we saw play out, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier too, was some of the officiating. Certainly it's not a good day after the championship games for officials in both games, really. I mean, in the AFC one, you had the roughing the passer that certainly looked like it wasn't on replay. Then you also had the pass interference, no call in the Saints-Rams game. When you look at how all that went down, and certainly a lot of conversation, I think these kind of games generate good conversation that ultimately maybe drive the game to be a little bit better. But I know everybody, there's two schools of thought on replay. Some people don't want to slow the game down and have to take a look at it. And then there's the people who, no matter what, want to, quote, get it right. Where do you stand on that kind of stuff? And do you, again, think that maybe we're going to see some sort of changes evolve as to whether or not you can challenge or look at replays of penalties?
I remember back in the time when the NFL had when they were going through back in the day with replay, and it wasn't replay challenges. They just looked at every play, slowed the game down dramatically back in the day. And the NFL said, in fact, they got away from replay for a short time and said, we're not going to do it because it's slowing the game down. Then they came up with a system of, okay, now we're going to have challenges. I think if you start adding too many challenges for pass interference calls, because you've got a number of them. It wasn't just that play. The Saints, by the way, in the Pittsburgh game, they benefited from a call where the Pittsburgh defender literally almost didn't even touch the Saints receiver and was still called for pass interference. So you're going to have these egregious calls, but I can see a number of coaches just thinking every call is going to be a bad call, and you're going to over-officiate the game. I think the solution to officiating is the league for a few years has been going through changes to what it wants to do from the officials. It had the lockout a few years ago, the officiating union. You've had different heads of the NFL officials crew. They're moving them over to full-time officials. They're going through all these changes for a variety of reasons, and I think that you almost have the officials versus the league office. You kind of have a behind-the-scenes battle going on there. I think that the league just as a whole needs to say the first thing we need to do is get our officiating back up to a standard that's been at in the past, get it there, and then we can start worrying about all these other things about let's reduce the power of the union and all these different things that I think are causing the officials to be thinking more about, do I get the call right? They're thinking about doing their jobs rather than just doing their jobs. I think there's different ways to go about it, and I think you need to take a more of a macro approach to the solution.
Yeah, I think it's going to generate a lot of interesting conversation over the next 2 weeks for all that. When you spin this forward, obviously we have the evil empire back in the Super Bowl again. How amazing. I think it's pretty easy to say there's so many people who are going to be rooting for the Rams in this game just because they're not the Patriots. How amazing, though, is it when you look at what Bill Belichick and Tom Brady have done? I mean, I don't know we're ever going to see something like this again.
The really amazing part of it is you can go back to like the Dallas Cowboys from the mid-'60s to the mid-'80s, about a 20-year period. So about the same level we're looking at here with the Patriots. And the Cowboys didn't make the Super Bowl early on, and they had a run where they made 5 Super Bowls, and I think it was 12 years, and then they didn't make the Super Bowl for another time. So they had this run in the middle that was great, but the outsides weren't nearly as good. The Patriots had the run early on where they were great. They had the run in the middle where they almost had the undefeated season, a couple losses to the Giants, but still some really good seasons there. And then they've got this run here at the end where they've got 3 straight Super Bowl appearances. It's that kind of thing where they're able to get to the top. Other teams have mimicked them over a period of time to get close to that level, but they've never made it quite to a Super Bowl at that level. So the thing is, making the Super Bowls is the big difference that separates them from previous dynasties, because they've had long runs like this, just not ones that quite have had this many championship appearances.
KC Joyner joined us, the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN. KC, sticking with the Patriots for just a minute, we saw them have a strong running game, and I think that, they made it a physical game. They won a time possession. Is that something that they can do in the Super Bowl against the Rams? Because interestingly enough, the Rams were one of the worst rush defenses in the NFL, but for 2 straight weeks, they shut down the Cowboys and they shut down the Saints. So are the Patriots going to be able to do what they did against the Chargers and against Kansas City in the Super Bowl versus the Los Angeles Rams?
I think they're going to definitely want to, because yesterday had the type of game plan where we're going to load the box. By the way, they blitzed a ton after Mahomes, and they got pass pressure on 46% of his dropbacks. They just said basically we're going to load the box, and we're going to rush the quarterback. We're going to do everything we can to get pressure on Mahomes, and we're going to double his receivers. That was like their 3-part game plan that worked. If you try that against the Rams, you say we're going to load the box, and we're going to take away one of your receivers. Now, you can do that, and you can get away with that, I think, and maybe you can rattle Goff in that same manner. So I think loading the box and getting a pass rush on Goff and taking away maybe Robert Woods or Cooks, but probably Woods because he's the more versatile receiver. If they do that same game plan against the Rams, I think it could work almost as well as it did in this contest. So yeah, I think it's a replicable feat.
Casey, I was extremely impressed with Goff yesterday. I thought that for a young guy, his first playoff home game, he's never been in an environment like that. Look, no offense to the kid, but he played at Cal. He wasn't playing in domes that loud. in college. And this is a guy who everyone kept saying, well, he's basically the puppet of McVay, right? People act like I'm one of them. I'll admit it. I always wondered, how much of it is Goff and how much of it is McVay in his ear. And we saw in that game yesterday, especially second half, that team found ways to get third downs in ways that maybe he wouldn't be able to done a year or two ago. And I thought that his composure in that stadium, in that noise, was very impressive.
In that environment, on vertical passes, Goff goes 6 of 11 for 158 yards. It's 14.4 yards per attempt. That led all the quarterbacks yesterday, and it's an incredibly good number, especially considering it's a tough defense. You've got a strong secondary. You've got some very good corners in their secondary. Eli Apple's playing well. You've got Lattimore. I mean, you've got some really good people in their secondary, and to be able to do 14.4 yards per attempt against a crowd that was, I don't know that I've ever heard. I was on Twitter talking about people yesterday. Are these people doing whistles and things? I've never heard such a loud crowd. And from people on every kind of interactions that I have with Twitter, it's like, yeah, it's so loud, it's annoying to us just watching it on TV that the fans are just that crazy. And you could tell it rattled some of the Rams overall. You could see it at times rattled them. You could see it impact their ability to call plays or audible. You could also see, I think, it impacted the officials. I mean, you had that kind of a contest, and Goff still is able to hit 14.4 yards per attempt. That's really impressive.
The other thing impressive yesterday was the Saints only scored 23. The Eagles held them to 20. Do you think Wade Phillips saw the Eagles game last week and said there's things that they did that we can do against the Saints?
They blitzed a little more often. We were talking about that last week about whether or not you should be able to blitz Drew Brees and if it's going to work, because Brees in the last quarter of the season, he had one of the lowest yards per attempt totals against the blitz. The Saints were blitzed 7 times yesterday. Rams blitzed them on 7 occasions. The Saints averaged 2.9 yards per attempt on those plays. I mean, it's terrible. And they were out throwing a bunch of short passes, too, only 5.7 air yards per attempt. So it was I think they knew what the Saints would do if they did blitz them, that they would do side adjustments and do short passes. They wouldn't try and beat them deep. And I think they used that against the Saints to say, okay, fine, that's what you're going to do. We're going to take what your patterns are, and we're going to use them against you. It was really creative play calling.
The Saints moving forward, this is an organization that it looked like this was their year. And for Sean Payton in this 31.5 points per game offense, they were undefeated previously at home. Now they get their first loss. What can the Saints do moving forward in the next year to make sure that they don't have this happen again, where they get to the postseason and they only score 43 total points in 2 games?
Got to diversify their pass offense. It's too much Michael Thomas. He's great. He's fantastic. He's all pro. I mean, he's arguably the best receiver in the league. If not, he's one of the best, say, top 3 receivers in the league. But you can't funnel your entire offense through him. Look at the alternate receivers. Ginn's a good vertical threat. That's all he does. And ask Carolina Panthers fans about how often Ginn drops passes. He's not consistent. Traquan Smith has had good games this year, but he's not that consistent. Benjamin Watson he didn't play yesterday, but he's too old to rely on for your future. And, I mean, you got Keith Kirkwood. I mean, you've got just a number of guys who, outside of Thomas, who just aren't, frankly, good enough to rely on. You don't have a 2-person core like the Steelers did this year, or like the Rams did, or even just a number of players like the Patriots are able to get the rest of their offense to play at a certain level. The Saints haven't been able to do that, and they just need more skill position talent outside of the backfield, because if they don't, one-dimensional offenses like this will eventually pay this price.
Okay, so let's flip it back over to the Patriots-Chiefs game, because I have a couple questions I want to ask you about the Chiefs specifically. One is about Andy Reid. Some people were saying, including the people in the broadcast, Romo and Jim Nantz brought this up, he could have called a timeout on that 1st and goal. The defense looked absolutely exhausted. Andy Reid, he's been infamous over the years for not calling a timeout when he needed to, not always making the right call at the right moment. Do you think Andy Reid mismanaged that overtime situation?
I think that Andy Reid got caught into the Belichick. Remember, early in the game, the Patriots were running the ball, and they got the 8.5-minute drive in the first quarter where they just pounded the ball and wore the Chiefs defense down. I think that was part of their goal, is we think we can wear these guys down. We think they're going to play certain fronts that are very easy to read, and we think we can wear them down, and we think that if it does get into a shootout in the second half, in fact, I mentioned last week the Chiefs were 5-4 this season in games where they got into shootouts. That's where both teams scored 24 or more points. I think part of the reason they were year that they had that kind of record was because their defense would get tired. And I think the Patriots knew if we get into that type of game, because the Patriots were 5-0 in shootout games this year coming into that contest, I think they knew our conditioning will hold up better than theirs and we can wear them down. And I think that they probably knew that Andy Reid wouldn't make adjustments to the conditioning and can put them into that sort of situation. And it just shows them when you get late in the game, Andy Reid didn't call timeout from a conditioning perspective when he should have. And I think the Patriots knew they could do that.
What about Bob Sutton? Yeah, the defense got 2 interceptions. One was off Edelman's hands. 99% of the time he probably makes that catch. But some people were saying over last night into this morning that Bob Sutton has gone so far away from made him good years ago that he should be blitzing more. And this is the same question people have about Jim Schwartz. Oh, he's not blitzing enough. But I would argue that Bob Sutton has the same problem that Jim Schwartz has, which is the back end of his defense is not on the level where you might be able to get away with blitzing too much.
He blitzed 11 times, which is a solid
come on,
amount.
Casey. You know the Madden gamers out there. They think you should be blitzing every down.
They think he should. I think part of their problem is that when you're looking at it, I think that particular game is such a microcosm of why the Chiefs would be frustrated. They blitzed 11 times. The Chiefs blitzed 11 times against the Patriots, got pass pressure on 18.2% of dropbacks, about 1 out of 5. Not that good. The Chiefs were blitzed 10 times by the Patriots. Patriots blitzed 10 times against them. The Patriots got pressure 76.9% of the time. 3/4 of the time they're getting pressure. They see the dichotomy there, and they say, we know our offensive line is good, and when we're sending extra people, we're not getting to Brady, and when they're sending extra people, they're always getting to Mahomes. And I think that dichotomy there is part of what drives them to say Sutton got out-coached. Although, again, there were adjustments that were being made, and the Chiefs don't play a really complex defense, and they don't make a lot of those kinds of adjustments. But it's always said about Brady that you don't want to blitz him, because if you do, I mean, he averaged 10.1 yards per attempt yesterday when he got blitzed. You don't want to blitz the guy because he knows how to read these blitzes, and he'll crush you when you do.
When you look at the Chiefs going into this offseason, what do you think their biggest needs they got to get better at? Because, I mean, look, they got a phenomenal player quarterback, and they got some good receivers. I think, maybe their offensive line is maybe a little better than people expected coming into this season. So where do you think this team can get better to make sure they're back in a position to make another Super Bowl run?
I think they need to have a better, probably some improvements in the secondary. I still think they need to improve their pass rush. I think they need more depth on defense. I think that they got wore down yesterday, and it's something they need to consider. I don't want to say that you necessarily should consider a coaching change. You just get out of the conference championship game. But I remember Earl Weaver in baseball used to say that when his team would have really good seasons, that's when he would tend to make his biggest changes, because he could make them and people would forgive him if the team dropped off. Whereas if he tried to make it after a losing season, something bad happened, he'd get fired. So if I'm Andy Reid, I might be considering what I want to do to change on defense, because right now this is not a team that can handle shootout games, and they're going to keep getting in them, and you're not going to make a 3-game playoff run probably with this sort of defense and not get into a shootout game. If you're only winning 50% of them, you're not winning a Super Bowl with this defense.
Of course, we have plenty of time to break down the Patriots versus Rams. 17 years after the Patriots dynasty was built on beating the Rams all those years ago. And it's still Brady and it's still Belichick, Casey. So I ask you, I don't want to break the game down right now, but just looking at this game and just a general big picture, I think my biggest reaction is one of the things that stands out to me is that Belichick built the foundation of him being who he is on that game. This great game planner, this great strategist. And some people have argued that his greatest masterpiece is the fact that he got this team to the Super Bowl with such limited talent on defense. So, Casey, can Belichick game plan with that limited talent against the Rams?
I think that they said about the Patriots that they find ways to not beat themselves. And in fact, the most relevant Belichick quote I've ever heard, the one that's most insightful to what his philosophy is in football, he said, the less adaptable you are, the better it is that you have to be at whatever it is that you're good at. So if all you do is power on the football, you better be exceptional at it, because there are going to be teams that are going to try and take it away from you. You're still going to have to be able to do it. They're so multiple, they can do a variety of things. Sean McVay can be very multiple too, and he can do a lot of things on offense. And I think Wade Phillips can be more multiple on defense. Right now, he's relying on his front four to get pass rush pressure. He's not blitzing, but he's shown in the past that if he has to blitz, he doesn't have any aversion to it. He will do it. I think the Rams need to go in there and say, we need to find ways to make the Patriots react to what we're doing. They're going to try and take certain things away from our game plan. We need to find ways to immediately counteract that. Not wait to do it at halftime like the Chiefs did yesterday. Immediately counteract those things that they're doing. Anticipate them and counteract them early. If they do that, they can win the game. If they don't make the counterpunching to what the Patriots do earlier in the game, I think they're going to have a lot of problems in this contest.
Follow him on Twitter at KC Joyner TFS. Of course, he joins us after every Sunday game day. He will be with Mike Gill a little bit later this week, as well as next week, as we are your home for Super Bowl 53 right here on 97.3 ESPN FM. KC Joyner, 97 ESPN.com NFL Insider, joining us here on 97.3 ESPN FM on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. I got to keep all these titles straight here, Casey. It's easier said than done.
It is. There's a lot to it, man. There's a lot to it. Just you get here for the Super Bowl and follow all of us on Twitter. That's the gist of it.
Casey, appreciate your time here today.
Thank you, Dan.